Exercise 11 is all about inputting and outputting data. Now, Silhouette Effects is able to take in different sorts of data from other applications and of course output the data that we've created inside it. Now, there are three real main types of data that we can input and output. We've got tracking data, shape data, and rendered data. So that could be the rendered shapes or complete full frames. And we're going to look at tracking data first. So I'm going to create my first layer. I'm going to call this head. So I'm going to be taking some tracking data in from Mocha and just seeing how we can use that as well. So let's pop into Mocha now. And in Mocha I've got the same footage and a number of different tracks and shapes that I've already created. Let's turn the shapes off for the moment and just leave us with the tracks. So I've got a track for the hair, for the face, and for my boots here, and also for the midsection. Now the boots is just really point data that we're taking out. So let's take a look at that. Let's export out this tracking data here. We're going to take it out as corner pin data, and it's this one here which is corner pin only. And I'm going to save this out. And I'm going to save this out into the exercise file here, and we will call this boot right track. Save that there, and let's come back into Silhouette, and we'll create our layer up here, and we will call this boot right, and we'll come into our tracking. And once in the tracker, we have an option here to import our tracking data. We can take in After Effects corner pin, shake, and nuke. We can also take in simple format, which is Silhouette's basic tracking information, and details about how you can transform other applications' tracking data into Silhouette-friendly tracking data is included in the manual. So we'll just come in, and I'm going to come back to our getting data in and out, come to our boot right track, hit open. Remember, this is After Effects corner pin data, and we now have 4 tracking points. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got a little Z shape here. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. But I actually only want one tracker out of all of these. So I could pick one of these trackers if that's the one I want, or I can select these, of course, and create an average of those and delete my other ones here. And I'll call this boot right track. Hit play on that. Swing that back and forth. And that's now given us our boot right to hit apply on. And we can now work with that. So that's bringing it in just so we've got one point of tracking there. What do you want to do something a little bit different? Well, let's come back into to Mocha, and I'm going to come to my midsection track here. As you can see, it's just fairly straightforwardly tracked. Come to my export tracking data here, and let's take it out as After Effects corner pin data again. Let's save that out as midsection track. Come back into Silhouette Effects, and once in Silhouette Effects, I'll create my midsection layer. Come into import. Let's import my midsection track here, and I've got my 4 points again. Now I'm going to select all of these now, and my midsection layer as well. And if I hit apply at this point, it's going to say corner pin tracking data applied to active layer. So now instead of let's now delete those 4 tracks there and take a look at what's happened to my midsection. So you can see it's now distorting my midsection based on that corner pin. And this could be very handy indeed. Let's come in and let's create a very simple X-spline here. Cool, and let's hit play on that. And that's now distorting the midsection out. Now, if I'd have tracked that a little bit better, that probably would have done pretty much all our work for us. Because you can see, as I've actually been demonstrating throughout this whole course, what a huge bonus we've got by being able to distort the four corners here, and that's really the opportunity that the four corner pin tracking data there affords us. It gives us that same ability to do this little distortion without having to manually do it. So letting the computer do it. We can also do that with the Silhouette Effects trackers as well. We just have to remember to plant in 1, 2, 3, 4 as our tracking order. But sometimes, you just can't get a perfect track with just a point tracker. So that's when the ability to import mocha tracks really does shine and make Silhouette Effects even more useful. But another cool thing is we can take out, let's come back to my tracker again, we can export out other tracking data. So we've got my little track here, which my average, if I turn that back on, we've got my average track here. I can export that out to either to After Effects, discrete, nuke, shape, or the simple format, which is what I was talking about before. So that's Silhouette Effects' own format. This lets us not only work with the shape data and the shape renders, but also it extends the functionality to the trackers as well. So one thing we can do here, which is actually very interesting. So if I take my X-spline here and select everything here, and right click, I can create a corner pin tracker from the shape bounds, or a tracker from the shape center, or point trackers from each of the points here. So this is great if we're going to be adding effects to certain points along the shape later on in the compositing process. But also being able to create a tracker from the point center here also can be a great benefit later on at the compositing stage. So that's the stuff we can do with trackers. I mean, that's exceedingly useful as it is. If we manage to generate up a tracker with the planar tracker here, we can then take that out as a corner pin tracker into After Effects as well. So that does have quite a few uses. So another thing we can do is import shape data itself. So for example, if I come into import here, not only can I import media, which we've been doing throughout, we can also import shapes directly from Commotion, Elastic Reality, Shake, SSF shapes, and also silhouette shapes. So if you've got multiple people working on a single shot, we can then sort of bring them all together into one right here. But let's come in and import a Shake SSF here. We've got our face mask going on there, and you can see here's our face mask, 0 mask, which is the name it's given it. So if I come in here and just come to my layer, call this face mask, we'll just call this face, and bump that in there. Let's have a little look there. So you can see it's brought in my my shake shape. Let's look at the reshape points here. It's brought them all in as Bezier splines, which we can come in and change as we want to. Now, because of the way this was rendered, it has taken out a shape on every single frame. If we were for example, let's come down to our boot right, or actually let's take our midsection here. Let's find something else there. So let's take our X-spline here and just see what we can export this out as. We can export this out as elastic reality shapes, fusion shapes, GMAS shapes for the Autodesk stuff, Nuke 6.2 plus shapes, Nuke shapes for versions prior to 6.2, Shake, and silhouette shapes. So if we take this out as a silhouette shape, and let's just call this midsection shape. Silhouette Effects will be very kind to me here, because I've selected a shape without selecting the parent layer. It will detect that and ask me whether I want to export the parent layer as well. Very important, of course, because the parent layer is the thing that contains the movement. The X-spline here contains very few keyframes. So let's export that out as well. Lock all this up. So if I come to import my silhouette shapes here, there's my midsection again. Let's give this another colour. And you can see it's taken this in just with the number of keyframes that I had previously. So it's completely the same. And if you have the optional plugin, you can use these shapes in Adobe After Effects as well, natively. And this leads us now to the final thing that we can export, and that is the rendered out data. Now, for the sake of this, I am going to open up a previous project. I'm going to open up Exercise 7, which is the spinning one here. Hopefully you'll remember this one. Simply because we've made this up of a number of different shapes here. And I'm going to go one step further and create another layer here as well, and call this body. I'm just going to add a very, very simple spline in here to represent the body. This will be in no way exact, but you know, it's there to give you an idea of what's going on. So let's bring that there. You know, and even keyframing this is probably doing too much work. So there we go. It just gives you an idea of what's going on. Let's bring that in. Cool. All right. So let's export this out. So we've taken a brief look at how we render stuff out. Now is probably a good time to take that a little bit further. So we can render the active node, which is the node we have working on here. So if we've got something where we've got keying going on, as well as the roto work, we can export out the composite node, which is really what we saw going on in the previous exercise. But if I just wanted out the rendered roto splines here, then I can just come into the render active node when the roto is selected, and that's fine. And it gives us an opportunity now to come in and create a custom range, which is what I'm going to do, because we don't need to sit through all of the frames exporting all the time. And we can take it to any number of still formats and also out to a QuickTime movie as well, with either run length encoding, PNG or JPEG. Just be aware that JPEG won't support an alpha channel as well as color channels. Let's go to TIFF, because TIFF will support both color and alpha channel within the same file. And we get to do a whole load of stuff here. We can export out color plus alpha, or just the color, or just the alpha. Now, quite a lot of the time, if you're just exporting shapes out to go to your compositing system, then you will be just taking out the alpha channel here, and we can select what resolution we want to go on as well. Obviously, the lower the resolution, the faster it is to render. So if you're just doing something for a quick test, you know, you can take this down a little bit lower, and that will speed up the process a little bit. Same thing with the fields. If you're working with interlaced footage, you've got your interlace going on there. If you're working with 3/2 pull down stuff, you can set your cadence here as well. And I'm just going to save this to a new directory. And I'll call this renders out. Delete me, because you won't be needing this folder. Cool, and we can give it a good file name. So I would call this, because this is everything, I'm going to call this human spin. Of course, human spin all 001. We get to give it an output start frame number and choose the padding as we saw before. In this case, I'm going to have padding of 3. And a prefix, we can either have dot or dash or underscore or whatever it is your system likes to work with. And once I'm happy with that, I can hit render, and that will quickly render that out for me. And if we take a look in that folder now, we can see it's taken out my shapes. It doesn't look very impressive, but it's what works. I'm going to take it out to something a little bit more interesting next time, which is going to be from frame 27. Of course, another thing we can do with the active node, let's render this from frame 27 to frame 57, for example, and we do color plus alpha, is we can take this out as a slap comp and take this down to quarter res, just so you can see that there, and I'll call this human spin slap. Hit apply, and you can see this is now rendering as if we had the alpha overlay turned on. So we just check things out there. Interestingly enough, because we've been working with TIFF, which supports alpha channel built in as well, that's taken it out and cut it out as well. So in this case, I might just want to have color only with a slap comp turned on, and hit render again. Then when we look at our previews, we don't have any alpha channel coming in. Cool. Now a great workflow and time saver is to be able to render out either layers or individual shapes to separate files automatically. So here I'm going to render out my layers to separate shapes, and I will call this one human spin 001. I'm just going to take the alpha out on this one and hit render. And this is going to go through each of our individual layers, working from the bottom upwards, and take those out. So take those layers with all of the shapes that are contained within that layer. And if we had export out shapes or render shapes to separate files, it would do the same thing, but for each individual shape. And it will give us the result of the shape as it is within the parent layer. And it's given us what we need here, and the file names are our prefix, which is the file name we gave it, plus the name of the layer and the frame number. So here's where it really is vitally important that we do name our layers correctly. And the final one is being able to render out shapes to different channels. Now in this case, we've been working with all of our shapes and all of our layers, in fact, set to the channel of alpha. Now what we can do here is we can, if we want to, set these to go out to different channels. And let's set this to green, and this one, which is now locked, let's set this one to red, and come to our body circle and set this one to green here. And at the moment we can't see the difference, but if we wanted to preview what that was going to look like, we can take our view down here to channels, and we can skip through the various channels here just to see what's going to go on. So if I now export these out to channels, render shapes to channels, take this to color plus alpha, we need to export it out to a format that can support color plus alpha, for example a TIFF, and let's call this one channels. But in the compositing app, you can then separate out these channels as you want to, just with one file here. So, for example, if we wanted to and we can set the channels here to come for our human spin, and we'll set the we can set the channels to the individual color channels as we had them. So there's our little red, or there's our nose we had on the red channel there. And what do we have on the alpha channel? Absolutely nothing. And in the blue channel we had that part of the face. So we can come in then remap those channels as and when we need to. That could be a smart way of saving time if we've got a certain house format that we set to, or that we stick to when it comes to separating out individual characters maybe on separate color channels. Cool, but that was that was rendering out shapes to channels. So let's just reset all of these now to channel alpha. So we'll go to the right place. Now let's show you one more thing before we wrap this up, and that's render active node again, and that's coming in and rendering this out with an external alpha channel. So I'm going to save color plus alpha here, and call this X, hit render on that. So it is rendering out both our color and our alpha channels. And we'll wait for that to finish. And if we take a look here, it's now taken out our color channels and our alpha channels separately, and given us the suffix alpha at the end as well, so we can match those up quite nicely. Cool. So I mean, really, one of the big strengths of a Silhouette is the fact that it is so flexible, and you can import a great deal of data from other applications. So this makes it ideal to sit in the middle of quite a broad workflow, where you've got a whole load of data coming from various places and going to a whole host of other places as well. The great flexibility of being able to import a whole host of different tracking data, especially tracking data from Mocha, which really does have a unique place in motion tracking. I mean that really will help to speed up the rest of the roto in Silhouette effects. And the same way, being able to import different sorts of shapes from other applications as well can also help speed things along when you've got different artists working on different systems. In the final exercise, we're going to be doing a sort of wrap up. We've gone through a whole host of features in the last few hours, so I just want to wrap those up with my general overall approach to rotoscoping. But that's coming up in exercise 12.